Let's return to Live from the State Capitol with Fred Dicker here on Talk 1300.
And welcome back to the State Capitol. We're very pleased to be joined by Jeff Gildersleeve, a very interesting guy who's in the Warren County Sheriff's Office right now heading a drug detail. But way back when he was, I guess, growing up in Oneida County and graduated Ilion High School, he went off to the Marines. And when he came back from the Marines, he joined the New York State Police. And he had a stellar career there, moving up the ladder to a variety of positions, starting out, of course, as a trooper, but then eventually being involved in several major drug task forces. And he certainly has a sense of not only what it takes to take down drug gangs and interdict supplies that come from Colombia or Mexico, wherever they may come from, but he also knows the toll, I'm sure, that drugs take on the lives of a lot of innocent people, the damage it does in communities where people are just hungry for fast bucks, which you could make in the drug business. You can make $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a day or a week, depending on your level. The seductive nature of that, especially if you don't have much of an educational background, or more likely you don't have an interest in education or don't have any skills, is enormous. And talk about a major undertaking. It's not quite as daunting as facing a Mexican or Colombian drug gang, but Jeff Gildersleeve sort of came out of the blue to challenge the official, really. He is a designated Republican candidate for sheriff, Mike Zerlo, who's a longtime employee of the Saratoga County Sheriff's Department. Jeff Gildersleeve has not worked there, but he's working in the Warren County Department right now, and Sheriff's Department, and, of course, the State Police, as noted. And with that as background, and a lot of questions to ask Jeff about why he got into the race and how he differs from Mike Zerlo, let's get right to it, because Jeff Gildersleeve is here right now in the Post Media Center. Good morning, Jeff. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Fred. Thanks for having me here.
Great to have you. If you would give listeners a little bit about your background. As noted, you came from Oneida County. When did you arrive in Saratoga County? How long have you lived in the county?
1981. I got out of the Marine Corps in June of '81, and I was in the State Police Academy in October of '81. I've been bounced around with different promotions and assignments, but I've lived in Saratoga County nonstop for the last 23 years. I moved back when full-time when I got out of New York City in the drug task force down there.
What community do you live in now? What town?
Ballston Lake.
Okay, lovely. You on the lake itself?
I am.
Ah, very nice. Lucky you. And how long have you been with Warren County Sheriff's Department? Was that about 4 years, 5 years?
About 5 years.
Okay. If you would just give us a sense of your vision of the sheriff's office, what you'd like to do with it. And I ask that because Jim Bowen is a well-respected sheriff, the longest-serving sheriff in the state, has endorsed your opponent, as you know, Mike Zerlo, say he's best to succeed him. And Mike Zerlo certainly knows the department, has been working in it, and just as a final observation, and you certainly know there's been anybody, whether it's the congressman or the state senator or the state assemblyman or the county Republican organization, they've all endorsed your opponent, Mike Zerlo, saying he's the best for the county. So if you would, with that as kind of a context, give us your view of the county and explain why, if you would, you'd be better than Mike Zerlo.
Well, the county itself is right on the edge of a tremendous amount of growth. Between the chip plant, there's the possibility of a casino going in there. We need to be prepared for this surge in growth, and I think the only way we're going to do that is by modernizing the sheriff's office. Right now, they're functioning at a level from 20 years ago at least. They have no departmental email, very limited internet access. There's no website for the department. There's no Facebook. The manner in which they handle the road patrols, they're using them quite often to do prisoner transports during the day. There may only be 2 cars available in the county to answer calls while everybody else is running prisoners. Almost every other county uses corrections to do that. And the other thing I really would like to look at, because of my federal experiences where I first saw this, is we did video arraignments. And certainly, yes, there's an initial cost to get the equipment, but I think over time you're going to save a lot of money. You're not using 2 officers to transport somebody to the far reaches of the county. You put them down in front of a monitor. The prisoner sees the judge on the monitor. The judge sees him. They do the arraignment, and you're not tying up the officers. You're not using vehicles. You're not using fuel. Big savings all the way around. Plus, the added benefit is that you'll have more officers on the road to answer your calls. So when you dial 911, you want somebody coming immediately, not somebody that's tied up at court.
No, I agree. Is that being done in this state by other sheriffs, video arraignments?
I think there's a couple of counties right now that actually are doing this on a test basis.
So, I mean, you're saying that Jim Owen really let the Saratoga County Sheriff's Department slipped back into the past, didn't keep a pace with the technological changes that he should have kept pace with? Is that it?
Yeah, I mean, Sheriff Bone's done a phenomenal job over the years. He has. I mean, he's like you said, the longest tenured sheriff in the state, but technologically, way behind the times.
You know why that is? Have you ever had a chance to ask him about it, or do you know if Mike Zerlo is defending him on that one?
I don't know the answer to either of those questions.
How about just law enforcement generally in terms of the sheriff's role? Many communities, of course, like Saratoga Springs or smaller communities, Mechanicville, have their own local PDs. But for many areas, the Saratoga County Sheriff, along with the state police, are the agencies, the police agencies that protect people. Do you think people are well protected in Saratoga County by the Sheriff's Department?
You know what? The men and women of that department are outstanding. They're well trained. They're smart people. They're good quality people. They just need a little bit better support from their leadership to get the job done a little more efficiently. We certainly don't, for the people of the county, they can't have just one or two cars available in the county. That also affects the officer's safety. If you have an incident and your nearest backup is 40 minutes away, that's a problem.
Well, but there are state police around, right? And
there are.
other departments. Are there any evidence, is there any indication, you have an example of anybody, say, who wasn't properly protected, or any police officer who was harmed because of a lack of backup as a result of the shortage? Has it happened?
None that I'm aware of. But, for example, the other night there was a robbery of a pharmacy. There were 4 cars on in the entire county. That's a big county.
Huh. 4 sheriff's cars.
Yes.
But how many state police cars?
I don't know.
Okay, because they do supplement, if not, or is it the sheriff that supplements the state police? I guess it depends on the area. In Clifton Park, the state police has a pretty strong presence, do they not?
As does the sheriff's office,
Okay.
and also Half Moon. I've said for years that it's not one of those things where one agency can handle it all. Clifton Park, Half Moon, that entire area of the county is probably one of the busiest areas in the Capital District area outside of Albany, Schenectady, Troy.
We're talking to Jeff Gildersleeve, who's one of 2 Republican would-be candidates for sheriff primary 2 weeks from tomorrow. Jeff, how did you decide to run for this? You apparently have no political background. You have obviously very little, or maybe no political support, whereas your opponent, Mike Zerlo, is backed by the whole Republican establishment. What led you to decide to enter the race?
This is something that I had always thought in the back of my head. If Sheriff Bone ever retires, I'll give it a shot. Between my background with law enforcement and military, some of the assignments that I've had in law enforcement, leading people. When I retired, I was leading a multi-jurisdictional task force that consists of federal, state, and local agencies. I think it prepared me to make the decisions and do the things that needed to be done to run a department. I've also seen the things that work from the federal, state, and local level, and the things that don't work. And I bring that to the table. And through no fault of my opponents, either one of them, they have none of the leadership experience that I do. And so I bring that to the table. But I really think that the department needs a new look. They need to have a fresh look. Quite honestly, I mean, 43 years of doing everything one way, it needs to be changed. And I think my opponent is just more of the same.
Let me just ask you, during your time at the state police, what sort of reputation the Saratoga County Sheriff's Department had when it came to, say, participation in joint task forces that you were involved with? Was it a good one?
It's been a mixed bag. I mean, we did actually have a couple of guys from Saratoga County assigned to the DEA task force, but to my knowledge, that's the first time that they had done that. They actually worked for me when I was assigned there.
Let me note there is the Democratic candidate in the race as well, a gentleman named Phil Lindsay, who also, in I guess, kind of Saratoga County style, has for some reason the Conservative Party support as well. The Democrat has the Conservative Party support. When it comes to real differences between yourself and Mike Zerlo, what are they?
Some of the big ones are my leadership experience and ability, also my stance on the SAFE Act. From day one, I've stated very clearly that I would not enforce it. My opponent has had several stances on it over the course of this campaign.
Well, one thing he did observe, and I think, by the way, let me let you finish. What else besides those two, administrative experience and attitude or approach to the SAFE Act, would you cite, if anything else, to differentiate yourself with Mike Zerlo?
My ability to work well with a multitude of people. Working within the task force environment, you had to get the job done with people that came from a lot of different agencies.
You think Mike Zerlo can't do that or hasn't had that experience?
Definitely hasn't had that experience.
Okay. On this question of the SAFE Act, as you well know, it's a very sensitive and serious thing for a law enforcement person to claim that he or she won't enforce a law, that they pick and choose amongst the laws. And I think Mike Zerlo, at one point anyway, was being critical of you on that. What do you say to people who say, hey, you take an oath of office to uphold all the laws, not to decide which ones you uphold and which ones you don't? What's the answer on that one?
Well, there's a couple of answers. The first one is that the ultimate law that I swear to uphold is the Constitution. And if we firmly believe that a law is unconstitutional, it's incumbent upon us not to enforce it.
Well, now, where is it incumbent upon you? I mean, isn't that what the courts are for, to
Absolutely.
decide?
Yes, it is.
So public officers can't decide themselves that they're constitutional experts and named as the Constitution requires, and what it doesn't. They have to be guided by court decision. Don't you agree?
That's correct.
Okay.
But there is no court decision on this. It's brand new law. And quite honestly, I mean, any law that is more onerous for the law-abiding than the lawbreaker, I have to question anyway. I mean, since when have we, in an attempt to get a few lawbreakers, punished, in effect, the law-abiding?
Well, they do it in New York City all the time. It's called stop and frisk. They stop millions of people to try to get 1/10 of 1% or whatever the percentage is of people carrying guns. But that's a very good point. And let me ask you to expand on that a little bit, but let me just first point out that here we have in Jeff Gildersleeve, law enforcement person all his professional life, an ex-Marine, and he'll talk for himself, but here's an example of someone who contradicts the claim that Berg and the governor and others who make that all law enforcement wants to ban these so-called assault weapons and put these very severe restrictions that they've now put on Second Amendment rights in terms of individual gun ownership, which was at the heart of the Bill of Rights. One of the key Bill of Rights was clearly based on the view, if you just study the history at the time of the Revolutionary War and then the adoption of the Constitution, the reference to a well-regulated militia was a reference to all able-bodied men at the time. You didn't have to be in a militia. All able-bodied men were considered part of a militia. This was something that was seen as vital to avoid dictatorship and to protect the individual rights. It was a statement of freedom to be able, as an individual, to own a firearm. But with that as background, Jeff, let me ask you, if you would, to expand or explain why you think the governor's so-called SAFE Act is not a good law, is an unconstitutional law. What about it do you oppose?
In effect, what it's doing is the only people that are truly affected by this law are the law-abiding. Lawbreakers, by definition, break laws. And really, as somebody who's getting ready to commit an armed robbery, a homicide, or some other vile crime, if you think that they really are concerned about what type of weapon they have or how many rounds they might have in a magazine, you're sadly mistaken. This is not a law that's doing anything to make anybody safe. In the end, it'll be an add-on charge for somebody. It'll probably be thrown out when they plead guilty to something else. It's doing nothing to the lawbreaker, but it's punishing law-abiding citizens. And that just, to me, it's turning our system upside down. By when we start passing laws that are going to affect more the law-abiding than the lawbreakers, what are we doing? It's a very small percentage of criminals that is committing the vast majority of violent crimes.
And they virtually all are using illegally obtained firearms when they do it.
Yes,
they're not legally obtained
correct.
firearms.
They're not going to a gun shop. They're not doing a 4473. They're not putting their name down. If they do go to a gun shop, it's usually somebody else they're trying to get to buy it. And I got to tell you, I mean, the local shops around here do a phenomenal job of weeding out these straw purchasers. Speaking
of which, Brian Olson, owner of several local shops, is one of your strongest backers, the gun guy from Paul Vandermerkshire, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I'll tell you, Jeff, in all my years of covering state government, all my years of trying to study political science and understand what goes on in our culture, I've never seen a law that is stupider in one particular provision than this SAFE Act. And the provision I'm thinking of is the one that says you can't put more than 7 rounds into a magazine capable of holding 10 or 15, but you can go to a firing range in a sanctioned competition and put 10 rounds into the gun. So in order to be at a firing range and have 10 bullets, that's fine under Governor Cuomo's law. But if you're home at 1 o'clock in the morning living in an isolated area of, say, Lake Luzerne or Providence, New York, or some other rural area, and there are tons of them, and somebody's breaking in, you've got your children there, you can't put more than 7 rounds in your bullet with 2 guys coming in through the window. I mean, it's just insane, and I don't see how that cannot be held unconstitutional.
I agree. And here's the other thing. I mean, just think about this. Typically when you load a firearm, a magazine-fed weapon, the weapon is empty. You put, in this case, you could put 8 rounds in the magazine thinking you're going to chamber 1 round, so then you'd have 7 in the magazine. So now you're compliant. What if you put that magazine with 8 rounds in, decide not to chamber a round, which actually is a safer way to carry a weapon. Some people do it that way. But now you're violating the law. You've got the exact same number of rounds in the weapon, but just by virtue of having it in the magazine and not one in the chamber, you're now in violation of the law. Is that the dumbest thing I've ever heard of?
Being turned into a criminal. We just saw the Saratoga County DA, did we not, drop a SAFE Act charge against and substitute other charges. There's a lot of rumors around that the state police have been ordered to go out of their way to try to arrest people under the SAFE Act, ordered by the governor's office. Do you know if that's true?
I do not know that. I've not heard that.
Okay. No, you hadn't, because it's some of the, I wouldn't call it paranoia, but there's a lot of fear out there that the governor has engendered, and I think that's one of the stories going around.
And I've not heard, I've heard rumors, but I've not heard anything specifically from within the state police. And quite honestly, I think the reason people are concerned about this law is because of the manner in which it was passed.
Well, it was breathtakingly undemocratic to use the so-called message of necessity when there was no necessity and no debate. And, of course, we know Dean Skelos, the Republican leader, gave the go-ahead for that. It couldn't have been done without him.
Yes.
What about all the Republicans lining up for your opponent, Mike Zerlo, Jeff? What accounts for that?
It's part of, I think, the Republican Party is closing ranks to support the guy that they want. And
well, that's obvious, but why do they want him and not you, do you think? Is he's a long-time soldier in their ranks, or Jim Bowen has made the case and they're taking Bowen's leadership? What do you think the reasons probably are?
I think that's both of those reasons are probably close to the truth. He's been involved with the Republican Party for years, and certainly Jim Bowen carries a lot of weight within the Saratoga County Republican Party.
No question about that. Could you talk to us a little bit about who's supporting you? I mentioned Brian Olison, who last I knew lives in Washington County, I think.
He does.
But he's a well-known figure, but you must have supporters of some stature, some organizations that have endorsed you. Can you tell us about those?
Yes. New York State Rifle and Pistol Association came out early on and endorsed me.
Say, after the Freedom Palooza, I'm not sure you want that endorsement. The loser Palooza.
And I feel bad about that. I do, because
yes, I think it was very sad, but some group of people showed a level of incompetence that I don't think I can recall ever seeing since something that was called the American Music Festival in Saratoga Springs in the 1970s.
And unfortunately, one of the things that the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association needs at this time is support. And they need funds. I mean, this lawsuit against the SAFE Act is, quite honestly, very expensive.
The NRA is providing, I'm sure, a good deal of money for that. But
they are.
Yeah. But in terms of support, any other groups that you could mention?
We have had, we are truly a grassroots organization. I mean, this has been...
Using the Internet much?
We are. And we're getting a lot of success with it.
If people want to check you out, can you give out your Internet address? They could take a look at some of your background and I assume contribute if they want to help you?
Yes, GildersleeveForSheriff.com. I'm also on...
And that's G-I-L-D, right? Not G-U-I-L-D.
Correct, G-I-L-D-E-R-S-L-E-E-V-E. And also I'm on Facebook, Jeff Gildersleeve. And you know what? What has amazed me is perfect strangers who are now becoming good friends has come out and just absolutely work their butts off for me.
Why do you think that is? I mean, what message that you have is resonating with these people that would fire them up, do you think? Is it the SAFE Act message? Or
the SAFE Act is a big part of it. A lot of it is they're trying to get away from the old boy network within the Republican Party. They want.
But you're certainly out there, that's for sure. I'll tell you, some of the people I met at the 100 and so people I met at the so-called Freedom Palooza on Saturday, and I've heard this from others too, are voicing a degree of bitterness and unhappiness with the New York State Republican Party that I can't recall ever hearing before.
You know what? And we need to have a process wherein more people are involved in selecting candidates. The continued committee process where in effect what they're doing is they're giving the wink and the nod who their candidate's going to be, and that can't keep going on. It's going to end up hurting the party overall.
Well, what's the alternative? I mean, the problem is people aren't participating in the political system the way they once did.
I think people are getting more and more involved. I'm amazed at what I'm seeing. Some of the people that have come out to help me I've had, I don't know how many people come up to me and say, I've never been involved in politics before in my life, but I'm getting motivated to get involved now.
People who know politics, I think, are skeptical, Jeff, when they hear that, because that oftentimes is what somebody says when they're trailing and they're going to win. But let me just make a point. I was up in Saratoga Springs last week, sadly, because the former mayor, Ray Watkins' wife, had passed away. Mm-hmm. And I was meeting some people I've known for many, many years, old friends and others, and I was talking to a Saratoga Springs political activist, and I asked him about your race, the sheriff's race, and he said he thought it was surprisingly close. And then in speaking to some other people, I was told, I don't know if it's from polling data or other indicators, but there is a sense that this is a very tight race. It could go either way, and that in and of itself, it seems to me, Jeff, is a testament to the skills that you've shown and a compliment to your organization. What's your sense of how close things are, in fact?
I think it's a definite horse race. I think that through hard work, we've gotten our message out there. We are knocking on doors. We are talking to people. The people that are helping me are as concerned as I am about what it is that people are worried about. I think our message on the SAFE Act is only a small part of it. I think modernizing the department, my strong stance on drug enforcement. Quite honestly, I mean, we're seeing a huge surge in heroin use and abuse.
Where is that being seen? In the city, Saratoga Springs, or
all over?
Throughout the county?
All over.
And Warren County as well?
Absolutely. It's actually a great concern of ours.
Who's bringing it in? Why are these drug gangs targeting the upstate area, new gangs? It's
that, and it's also profit, quite honestly. I mean, they're doubling the price of a bag of heroin from Albany to Saratoga to Warren County. I mean, it's not...
You think it comes out of Albany then, a lot of it?
Well, it's kind of convoluted. I mean, locally sourced cities are Albany, Schenectady, Troy. But a lot of people are going actually to New Jersey, which is a huge source area for heroin.
Where in New Jersey do they go to?
Well, believe it or not, a lot of times they'll meet down at the outlets down off of... the dealers will come up out of Jersey, and the suppliers will drive down and meet them down there. Day of shopping, so to speak.
Where is this heroin ultimately coming from? This is Mexican heroin, or it's...
The Colombians got very big into heroin some years back.
Right.
I think when they realized that they could... a kilo of heroin is probably 4 to 5 times more expensive than a kilo of cocaine. So the Colombians, if nothing else, realized they could make more money by bringing the same volume of drugs in. So they got involved in the heroin. But there's still Mexican, there's Colombian, there's also still heroin coming out of Afghanistan, and that area of the world is still big as well. But that tends to go a little bit more Europe, yeah. But a good mix.
Is it mainly young people who are just experimenting and trying and getting high, or is this, are you seeing serious junkies, drug addicts being created in the Saratoga and Warren County areas?
There's... Unfortunately, what's going on is there's been a lot of prescription drug abuse. The opiates are creating these addicts, and eventually it gets to the point where they can't get the pills that they need, or they can't afford the pills they need. And
they're going from the pills to heroin.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yes.
That's a kind of reverse phenomenon. It used to be, I think, that heroin addicts would try to get opioids when they couldn't get heroin, and now it's going the other way. That's introducing them to it.
And unfortunately, I mean, the problem is that kids don't see some of these prescription drugs as being the danger that they are.
Right.
And the next thing they know, they're addicted, and it drives them. I've seen some young, really. You look at them and you're stunned at what's happened to these young people. It's terrible.
No question. I saw that growing up, even with friends who died when I was a kid in the Bronx. Jeff Gildersleeve, a Republican candidate for sheriff The primary is 2 weeks from tomorrow. A lot of good people are backing Jeff Gildersleeve, and we appreciate you coming in this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very